Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hello everyone. I'm Megira Putri as a presenter in this conference, actually International Conference on Science, Education and Technology ORIS 2020. In this conference, I conducted a research under the title Pragmatics Study on Texas Analysis in Narrative Text in the textbook of SMP Nasima Semarang. Well, as we know that language is really important in communications, and then learning language can be in many ways, can be in many sides. One of them is knowing about pragmatics. Pragmatics is a study which learn about meaning in use or meaning in its context as Thomas. Levinson also stated pragmatics is a study in those relationships between the language and context which encoded in the language structure. And then pragmatics also divided into some parts. One of them is deixis. Deixis is a term which comes from the Greek word which has functions to indicate or point some grammatical features directly in a circumstances, utterance as Levinson's. You also state that the deixis which means pointing via language. And the last, Lyons also state that the deixis also called as indexical, which has functions as it is relevant to determine the proportional meaning of utterance. So deixis in educational field is really important and needs to be learned by the learners, because by learning deixis, they will be able to use deictic words properly. Therefore, the aids used by the learners support them in their learning activities. The aids can be as textbook. And then in my research here, I investigate the deixis appear that in the text that I took from a textbook of SMP Nasima Semarang. And then I formulated some research questions as the aims of my research here. As actually the first one is to know about the types of the deixis used by the text, and then the second one is to know about the dominant deictic word used by the text, and then the last one is to know about the interpretation of the dominant deictic word used in the text. Well, we go to the next point is about method of the research. Yeah, actually the research design of my research here is descriptive qualitative research, and then for the source of the data, I took some narrative text from a textbook of SMP Nasima Semarang entitled English Conversation for Youngsters, or ECY, under the title The Dog and the Rooster as the text 1, and then The Prince and His Best Friends as the text 2, and then the last one is The Rabbit and the Wolf as the text 3. And then for the technique of analyzing the data, I employed the Deixis theory of Stephen C. Levinson's 1983, and then I did several steps in doing my research to analyze the data. Well, in these slides also as the what we call like the result of the research, and then it is the answer of the first research questions that ask about what are the types of the deixis used in the text. Here we can see that almost all of the text used the types of the deixis, but here we can see that for the social deixis only used in two texts, namely text 1 and text 2. Well, we come to the example of the sentence in the text. For the person deixis, like the sentence "saw me the stone." Me here as the deictic word of person deixis, especially first person. And then the next about time deixis as example, as the sunrise in the next morning, the rooster crowed. In the next morning here as the deictic word of time deixis. And then the next is about place deixis, like example, Stone had a fallen on his back. On his back means as the deictic word of place deixis. The next about the social deixis. For example, the prince decided not to surrender. So the prince here as the deictic word of social deixis. And the last one is about discourse deixis. For example, this woke up a fox. This here means as the deictic word of discourse deixis. Well, we come to the next about result and discussion of the research. Yeah, here there are two tables to calculate or to describe the result and discussion of the research here. For the first table, that's about the calculation or the occurrences of the deixis that used in the text. Well, for the person deixis, namely for the first person deixis, there are twice occurrences used in the text, and then for the second person deixis used in 3 times, and then for the third person deixis used in 47 times, and then for the time deixis used in 9 times for the place Deixis, so 14 times, and then for the social Deixis 14 times, and the last discourse Deixis used in 7 times. So here we can conclude that the dominant types of the Deixis used in the text is for person Deixis, especially for the third person Deixis. And then because of this is for the dominant one, so I calculate, I describe this one in the next table. Here we can see that for the deictic word of person Deixis, is actually he as the dominant one. We can see that for the frequency of the references that used in the text is 20 times. So I can conclude in my research is almost all types of Deixis are used in amongst free text. And then the dominant types appeared in the text is person Deixis, namely the deictic word of he. Yeah, it is thought that the text is talking or retelling about someone else's story. Each type of the Deixis has their own functions in the events, and it depends on the types of the written or spoken text itself. Sometimes not all of the types of the Deixis are used or applied in those texts. Like the social Deixis doesn't use in one of them. It is because the genre of the text is narrative, especially fairy tale, which is quite rare to apply social Deixis. On the other hand, the deictic word of each type can be in many ways. Well, that's all for me. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.